It's actually the people around the whole world logging onto Netflix last night to find not one, not two, but 3 episodes from the new Harry and Meghan documentary. And after years of speculation, we got to hear their side of the story, their relationship, and also what happens beyond the tabloid.
A single message, one encrypted notification, and suddenly Meghan Markle was no longer planning her next move. She was racing against a royal machine that insiders claim had already made up its mind behind closed palace doors. While the world was distracted by headlines, whispers, and carefully crafted public appearances, something far more explosive was allegedly unfolding in silence. A decision so serious, so symbolic, that it threatened to sever one of the last remaining links between Meghan and the institution she once represented. And according to growing speculation, that decision triggered an emergency journey toward Washington while panic quietly spread through royal corridors. The question wasn't whether something had changed. The question was who had finally decided enough was enough. The timing felt almost too perfect to be a coincidence. One moment, Meghan was continuing life in California, navigating projects, appearances, and public visibility. The next, reports of an internal palace recommendation began surfacing through private channels, not public announcements, not official statements. Whispers. The kind of whispers that usually appear only when something much bigger is happening behind the scenes. According to palace-linked speculation, discussions regarding royal representation had reached a level that could no longer be ignored. And at the center of it all sat a phrase that carried enormous weight inside royal history. What made the situation even more dramatic was not simply the alleged recommendation itself, it was the reaction. Sources described a closed room where every word felt dangerous, a room where even silence seemed louder than conversation. King Charles reportedly sat at the center of discussions knowing that whatever happened next would echo through history. Some claim a recommendation involving Meghan's royal styling had moved closer to reality than ever before. Others insist nothing was finalized, yet the fact that these conversations were allegedly taking place at all sent shockwaves through every corner of royal speculation. And then there was Queen Camilla. According to accounts circulating around the story, Camilla's silence became one of the most discussed details of all. She reportedly said very little during crucial moments, but in royal politics, silence is rarely empty. Silence becomes a statement. Silence becomes strategy. Silence becomes mystery. Why remain quiet during a discussion carrying such emotional consequences? Was she protecting someone? Agreeing with the direction? Or simply watching events unfold? Nobody seemed to know. Yet the fact that observers kept mentioning her silence suggests it left an impression nobody could forget. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Meghan allegedly received a message that changed the atmosphere instantly. The description sounds almost cinematic. A secure communication, a sudden pause, an assistant waiting for answers that never arrived. Whether every detail occurred exactly as described remains impossible to verify. But what matters is how the story is being told, because in every version the same pattern emerges. Meghan reads something, Meghan freezes. Meghan understands the situation is becoming far more serious than ordinary palace tension. And where was Harry during all this? That may be the most heartbreaking element of the entire narrative. Reports paint a picture of a prince trapped between two worlds, a husband watching events unfold, a son still tied to the institution he left behind, a man receiving calls, seeing messages, and struggling to understand what was happening around him. Several accounts describe him pacing, staring at his phone, and wrestling with uncertainty. Whether those descriptions are symbolic or literal almost doesn't matter anymore, because they perfectly capture the image many royal watchers already have of Harry, a man forever caught between loyalty and distance. Inside the palace, the atmosphere allegedly grew even heavier. Documents were discussed, recommendations reviewed, procedures examined. Each step sounded administrative on the surface, yet beneath the formal language lurked something deeply personal, because this was never just about titles. It was about identity, status, legacy, belonging. That is what makes the entire controversy so emotionally explosive. Meghan's relationship with royal status has always been complicated. For supporters, she represents someone who challenged a centuries-old institution. For critics, she represents someone who walked away while still benefiting from royal connections. Both sides see the story differently, yet both sides understand one thing: the symbolism matters. As palace discussions reportedly intensified, attention shifted toward an older moment buried deep in royal memory. Insiders began revisiting a consultation that allegedly took place long before the current controversy erupted. At the time, few people paid attention. Now, suddenly, every detail seemed important. Every pause looked suspicious. Every exchange appeared loaded with hidden meaning. According to the narrative emerging from palace circles, Meghan entered those earlier discussions believing adjustments could still be negotiated, but something about the atmosphere felt different. Conversations became shorter, responses became colder. Small signs began appearing that suggested flexibility was slowly disappearing, not dramatically, not publicly, quietly, and that is often how the biggest royal shifts begin. Harry reportedly noticed it too. One palace-linked account describes him leaving a consultation without speaking. Not angry, not emotional, just distant, almost disconnected, as though he had witnessed something he could not yet process. That image has become one of the most haunting parts of the story because it suggests the fracture did not begin with the alleged HRH controversy. It began much earlier, long before emergency travel, long before headlines, long before the public even realized something was changing. The deeper this story went, the stranger it became, because once the alleged decision moved beyond discussion and into what insiders described as active planning, everything reportedly began accelerating at a pace nobody expected. What had once been whispers hidden inside palace walls was now threatening to become an international spectacle. Washington was no longer being mentioned as a possibility. It was being described as a destination. And suddenly, royal observers started asking a chilling question. Was Meghan leaving because she wanted to, or because she felt events around her were moving too fast to ignore? The atmosphere around her allegedly changed overnight. Staff members became quieter. Communications became more restricted. Messages arrived carrying fragments of information rather than complete explanations. Every conversation seemed to raise new questions instead of providing answers. Meghan reportedly moved through rooms with a level of focus that worried people around her. Not panic, not emotion, something more unsettling. Calculation, the kind of calculation people make when they realize circumstances have shifted and survival depends on adapting faster than everyone else. Meanwhile, Harry appeared trapped inside a nightmare of partial information. One source suggested he was receiving updates that contradicted each other. Another claimed communication channels were becoming increasingly difficult to access. Whether those accounts are entirely accurate remains unclear, but together they create a powerful image of isolation. A prince connected to every part of the story, yet somehow unable to influence any of it. And that may be what makes this entire saga feel so dramatic. Nobody appears fully in control. Not Meghan, not Harry, not even the palace figures allegedly overseeing the process. Inside royal circles, the conversation reportedly shifted from possibility to inevitability. That is the word that keeps appearing again and again. Inevitable, it is a dangerous word because it suggests decisions are no longer being shaped. They are simply unfolding. According to palace-linked accounts, advisors continued reviewing recommendations while constitutional language and procedural frameworks were repeatedly referenced. Publicly, such discussions would sound technical and boring. Privately, however, everyone understood the emotional earthquake hidden beneath those formal phrases. And then came the confrontation nobody could avoid. Not a public confrontation, not a press conference, a private reckoning. Reports suggest Meghan and Harry eventually found themselves facing the same reality together. Two people sitting in the middle of a storm neither could stop. Two people realizing that arguments, explanations, and appeals might no longer matter. The alleged decision had already gathered momentum. What remained was learning how to live with its consequences. Observers close to the story described an atmosphere of exhaustion rather than anger, as though years of conflict, speculation, criticism, and distance had finally arrived at a moment where everything felt heavier than either side expected. Yet outside those private spaces, the world was preparing for chaos. Newsrooms reportedly began scrambling. Commentators started choosing sides. Social media erupted with theories. Supporters framed Meghan as a target of institutional pressure. Critics argued the palace was merely protecting constitutional clarity. Everyone had an explanation. Everyone had an opinion. Almost nobody possessed complete information. And that is exactly why the story exploded, because uncertainty is the fuel that keeps royal drama alive. As speculation intensified, Buckingham Palace became the focus of enormous attention. Crowds gathered, cameras waited, headlines multiplied by the hour. Every delayed clarification generated fresh theories. Every unanswered question created another wave of commentary. The palace was no longer managing a private matter. It was managing a global narrative. And somewhere in the middle of that narrative sat King Charles, a monarch reportedly carrying the weight of institution, family, history, and public expectation all at once. Whatever role he ultimately played, the symbolism became impossible to escape. This was no longer simply about Meghan Markle. It was about the future relationship between modern celebrity, royal identity, and a monarchy struggling to define itself in a changing world. By the time Washington entered the picture, the emotional damage had already been done. The journey itself became symbolic, not merely a flight across countries, but a visible reminder of how far the distance between both sides had grown. Every mile seemed to represent another layer of separation, another chapter closing, another bridge disappearing into history. And perhaps that is why this story continues to grip public imagination, because beneath the titles, protocols, advisors, and palace procedures lies something surprisingly human. A family divided by loyalty, expectation, disappointment, and power. A system trying to preserve itself while relationships continue to fracture. A future king watching, a monarch deciding, a prince caught in the middle, and a woman standing at the center of a controversy that refuses to disappear. The official answers may eventually arrive, statements may be released, clarifications may be offered, but royal history has always taught one lesson. The most important story is often not what people say, it is what they refuse to say. And judging by the silence still hanging over this entire situation, the real story may be far from over.